Alrighty, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kyler Nathan, and I'm one of the undergraduate advisors for the psychology department at UC San Diego. And I just want to first take the time for thanking you all for joining us this afternoon or wherever you are, if it's morning, evening, and to learn just a little bit more about the psychology department at UC San Diego. If you have questions throughout the webinar, and just in case you're not familiar with the Zoom Q&A feature and the webinar feature, you can ask questions using that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We just ask that you don't share any personal information, of course. You do have the option of submitting questions anonymously if you don't want everyone to know who's asking the question. And I'll try my best to address as many questions as I can. I only have a few slides to go over because I did want to spend most of the time talking about questions that you have, because I feel like it's most important that the information I'm sharing is applicable to all of you. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, go ahead and send them to the Q&A. I'll get through the main beef of the slides first, and I'll be monitoring the questions just to see if any questions are relevant to the slides. And then we'll have plenty of time afterwards to answer any questions that you all have. And of course, you already know that this is UC San Diego, and that's me, Kyler Nathan. So a little bit about our department to start. We are one of the larger social science majors at UC San Diego, with over 2,100 students with psychology majors, as well as 575 students with psychology minors. And we'll get into the breakdown of the majors and minors in, I think, 1 or 2 slides, so we could talk about all the different majors that our students are studying. And then what's really exciting is that we have 31 full-time faculty in our department. And what does this mean for you as a student? Of course, many of you know, if not all of you know, that UC San Diego is a research-based institution, which means that we encourage and excite our students to get involved with research. And with psychology, there's so many faculty doing interesting research, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those research areas as well. And we hope that if you all decide to be Tritons, that you will also be able to participate in some of this cutting-edge research. At UC San Diego, we have what's called an experimental psychology program. What makes this slightly different than your stereotypical psychology program is that it is that research-based study of mental processing. And a common question that we get from students is if they can become a psychologist or a therapist with an experimental psychology degree. And the answer is definitely yes, because with this experimental psychology degree, you're still learning a lot about counseling techniques, or just the research and the history behind counseling and therapy, why therapy works, what therapists are doing when they're talking to potential clients, what type of mental disorders or mental health issues that they might be facing. These are all important things that are based in research at their core. So it is important for you as prospective therapists, prospective psychologists, to be able to understand a lot of the research behind a lot of the practices and theories within psychology. But then, of course, as we are a research-based institution, our faculty and students are doing research to be cutting edge when it comes to psychology. They're looking for new and better ways to solve different issues related to the field of psychology, and just to do things better. UC San Diego had a motto a couple years back, I'm not sure if it's still the motto, but to break things better. So not just breaking through barriers, not just breaking a leg and acting, but just making things better by getting to understand the underlying processes underneath those. And of course, the word art on the right is just a little clip art. You can probably see the watermarks on it. But that gives you some words that kind of go along with experimental psychology. And of course, it has that root word of experiment. So you can think of running experiments with participants, analyzing the research or the findings from various experiments that have been done with psychology. There's a lot that you can do with a degree in psychology at UC San Diego. It's just really up to you to understand what you want to get out of your psychology degree and how we, as your advisors, as well as your psychology department, can help you make that happen. So I thought it'd be easier to just give you a visual of the breakdown of the majors rather than just list them on the slide, but I will be going through each one in a little bit of detail, and then I'll give you all some information about how you can access these majors in our website to learn a little bit more in depth. As you see, most of our students are in that large red chunk, the psychology BS major, making up around 28.3% of our students, but we also have a psychology BA major. These two are our general psychology degrees, and these are most suited for students who know that they want to major in some type of psychology field, but may not have a specific focus or interest tied down to exactly what they want to do with their psychology major yet, which is totally fine. We don't expect you to have everything figured out with what you want to do with your major when you start at UC San Diego. And since psychology is not one of the capped majors, even as a first year or a transfer student, you can apply directly to the psychology program and it won't affect your chances of admissions because we accept any student, or excuse me, we accept students who apply to psychology regardless of if they start as a first year student in our program, or maybe you start as undeclared and switch into psychology, or maybe as a transfer student, you start preparing to transfer to psychology, but choose something else. Our major is open to new students. The psychology BA degree, this is actually the major that we recommend for students who are interested in counseling and therapy, because as you'll see when I break down the rest of the majors, all of our bachelor's of science majors require some type of research component, whereas the psychology BA major does not require research. The reason that is better for those interested in psychology or therapy is because those are careers that don't necessarily require or expect that their students have conducted some type of research prior to starting graduate programs, or even some career paths. But of course, if you want to do research and research excites you, then you might be better off with the BS degree. The main thing that I want to emphasize today for you all in this webinar is that even though one is a BA and one is a BS, and we definitely have more BSs than BA majors, the BA is not a lesser degree. It's just not focused in that scientific research. So for those y'all, just to reiterate, for those y'all interested in counseling or therapy, the BA is usually the route to go. It also does not require mathematics, whereas all of the BS courses do. So if you're trying to avoid calculus, which I know many of us sometimes are, the BA sometimes is the right option. Kind of working clockwise around the wheel from the psychology BA, I already mentioned the BS. When we start our specialization majors, starting with clinical psychology, making up about 16% of our students. Clinical psychology is pretty well known for those of y'all interested in psychology, of course, but looking at psychology from a clinical aspect. Cognitive psychology, looking at the psychology of cognition, studying the brain and the mind. Developmental psychology, which is also a BS degree, is understanding psychology through our development from a child through adolescence. Human health, sensation and perception, these are both working within the health fields, with human health focusing on just what it says, of course, the health of us as humans, while sensation and perception is focused on how we sense and perceive the world around us. And it looks like we have a question of which department of psychology works closely with children and parenting. Great question. So at its core, any of our psychology majors could be good for someone working with children or parenting. However, the three that I would say are most directly associated with that would be social psychology, developmental psychology, and maybe cognitive psychology. Developmental psychology would probably be the closest for those who work with children, just because you're understanding more about how children develop, how they learn certain things, whether that's language or cognition. With social and cognitive psychology, I think that would be good for those interested in like marriage counseling or parenting, or just even working with children in that same vein, because you'll be just learning about how humans interact and that social interaction, learning about social spaces and how people learn by being in those social spaces. So all departments of psychology can lead to practicing psychology. Great question. So at the end of the day, you could do anything with any of our psychology majors. If you want to go into practicing psychology, you can, no matter if you're a BA, a BS, cognitive behavioral neuroscience. The most important aspect for those future careers is actually going to be about what you're doing outside of the classroom. So regardless if you're in a BS or a BA, the only difference is going to be that research. So if you're interested in research, but also practicing psychology, you can do both. You don't have to have the BA to go into practicing, and then vice versa. If you have that BA, then that is a direct path to counseling. However, you can still go into other areas. It's just if you're focused in a career that does require research, then you will be better off in one of our Bachelors of Science majors. But even if you have a BA or a BS, at the end of the day, you're able to switch freely between the majors. So if you came to UC San Diego as a psychology BS, you took your first research class and actually found out that research isn't to your interest or to your liking, you could switch to the BA at any point of your UC San Diego career, given, of course, that you have a plan to finish your degree requirements within a timely manner. But thank you for that question. Hopefully that fully answers it. But if not, feel free to continue to add some additional questions in the chat. I think I left off on sensation and perception, which is just sensing the world around us and how we perceive the world. looking at anything from how we sense colors to how we sense speech. All of those different things come into sensation and perception. And it is our smallest major currently, with only 5 students in the major, which I think is pretty cool because you can say that you're one of 5 sensation perception majors at UC San Diego. But it's not a lesser major than any of our majors. I feel like it's just that students who are interested in sensation and perception, sometimes they find that they're more interested in cognitive psychology in a general scope, not just necessarily sensation and perception. But let's say that you're very interested in research about how we sense and perceive the world, then sensation and perception could be the right one for you. Social psychology, I alluded to in answering one of your peers' questions, but just looking at those social spaces, I think the social psychology one, along with clinical, are probably what most students are looking for when they're looking at some type of specialized psychology major. Cognitive behavioral neuroscience, this is a joint psychology BS major with the psychology department as well as the cognitive science department. And this major is the most neuroscience heavy out of our 10 psychology majors. So for those y'all who are very interested in learning in the brain, maybe beyond just the cognitive psychology specialization major, then the cognitive behavioral neuroscience would probably be a good fit for you. And you'll be taking classes in both the psychology department at UC San Diego, as well as in the psychology department, or if I said psychology twice, psychology and cognitive science. And then last but not least, our newest major, business psychology. And this is a fairly new major. I think it started in around 2018 or 17, I believe. And the business psychology major is focused in business, but the psychology of business, which may sound like, yeah, duh, like it's called business psychology. But you're looking at industrial organization, you're looking at managing teams, you're looking at marketing, you're looking at operations. It's very interesting. And we came about this major because we noticed that a lot of our students were interested in psychology majors, but they also wanted to own their own practice or own their own business. So many of them declared a business minor. So we looked at this as a way to combine those two interests into one major. And the other cool thing about business psychology is that you're able to take some of those business classes at Rady School of Management, which is a world-renowned business school where students get their MBA. And actually, I'm getting my MBA at Rady right now, so I'm definitely enjoying learning a lot from those faculty members. But since Rady only works with graduate students, it's really cool as a business psychology major that you'll be able to take some of those business courses at the Rady School of Management. So that's quick, and hopefully I didn't talk too fast about each of these individual majors. But what I did want to add in the chat for our prospective students, we created a major match, kind of like a BuzzFeed style quiz, which I just added into the chat. So if you're wondering like which one of these majors would best suit me, you can take the time to take that major match quiz. It only takes a few minutes and it's really just made for fun and to get people thinking about all of the possibilities of a psychology major. It's not meant to be an overly conclusive result. Like there's not a lot of data that's being used from that BuzzFeed quiz, but just a fun way for students to start thinking of the different majors that they can perhaps have as a psychology major at UC San Diego, and just the types of questions that these different majors aim to answer. The next question here is about internships and study abroad. I'm gonna save that for the end just so we can focus on the majors, but I will come back to that question and make sure that we get that answered. And we'll have plenty of time at the end for additional questions too. So that's the breakdown of the majors. So in total, we have 1 BA major and 9 BS majors. But once again, any of these majors could be the perfect one for you. It's just about looking at the major requirements and understanding the classes you're most interested in and most excited about. Oh, sorry, I just realized that I'm out of full screen. There we go. So yeah, that's the breakdown of all the majors. And then we also have 2 minors in our department. We have a psychology minor as well as a computational social science minor. So let's say that you're interested in the field of psychology, but you find out like, you know what, psychology really isn't the best major for me. You might consider switching to a psychology minor. And we have, as the first slide mentioned, we have just under 600 minors. And what a minor is at UC San Diego is 7 courses fully focused in psychology. So you'd be taking 7 psychology courses. And then the other minor is a computational social science minor, which is looking at data analytics from a social science perspective. So slightly different than a data science or a computer science minor because it's tailored to answer social science questions. We have another question here about kind of majors. Is it possible to be a part of both forensics and counseling psychology? Great question. So we have some career pages on our psychology website that are dedicated to talking about like getting involved in forensics. So in short, yes, it is possible. You would just want to make sure you're taking the appropriate coursework to make yourself marketable for graduate programs in forensics or for careers in forensics, because at its core, forensic psychology is kind of looking at some of those clinical aspects of psychology. I believe there's also some chemistry involved in that. So even if you're not able to find a specific forensics major on our campus, you are able to get to that same end goal by developing your skills by taking certain classes within those fields. So as you're browsing through our psychology department website, just look through all the different career pages, a lot of the resources on there that we have for you, because there's a lot of great information there. And many of it will be helpful for you as you're planning out your future studies at UC San Diego. Just to move forward to get to talk about research opportunities, but as well as kind of touching on that internships and study abroad question. Not going to go through every single thing listed here because I have full faith that y'all will find the stuff that you're most interested in on the slide. But these are the different research questions or areas that many of our psychology faculty are currently answering or interested in answering. And this is the same research that you can be involved with from day one as an undergraduate student. So whether you're really interested in learning about how children learn about the social world, which could be looked at as a social psychology or a developmental psychology question, how much can we remember about what we see, kind of a sensation and perception or a cognition question, mindfulness-based approaches for enhancing mental well-being. There's a lot of interesting questions that you can answer with a degree in psychology or just by taking these psychology classes. And let's say that all of these questions are kind of interesting to you, but you have your own question that you're wondering about. You can get involved with independent research with the faculty as well. We're all about research at UC San Diego, and there is a strong research focus. So if that is your passion, we have the resources out there for you. However, if research isn't something that you're super interested in, or maybe it's something that you're not interested in right now, that's okay too. You are able to still take research classes as a BA major, and you're still able to conduct research as a BA major. So you can kind of stick your toes in the water and see if you do enjoy, in fact, doing research, as well as without having to commit, rather, to having to do research for your major requirements. But now I want to kind of get to the question about internships and study abroad options. So in a general sense, study abroad at UC San Diego is not major dependent. So no matter what your major is, you are able to have access to internships as well as to the study abroad office. The study abroad office has advisors that work with students based off of their major or the area of the world that they want to travel to. And there are study abroad programs available throughout the academic year as well as over the summer. So if you are interested in studying abroad, definitely encourage you to check into it. We do have a study abroad page on our psychology website that has kind of higher level information that you would need to know at this point, but just in a general sense, that page on our website talks about the types of courses you should try to take when you're studying abroad as a psychology major. But for now, since y'all are all prospective students, I think the most important thing is to think outside of the box, think about the different areas of the world you might want to travel to, think about what types of classes you would want to learn about abroad or what type of research you might want to do abroad. And then after you have your goal and your vision in mind, see how you can make that work for your major, because there's so many opportunities out there and there's so many advisors that are there to help you along the way of figuring those opportunities out, that it'll be pretty easy to find something that you're interested in. You just have to begin to ask the right questions. For internships, there's a number of ways to get involved with internships. The one that I share with most of our psychology students is through the Academic Internship Programs Office, or AIP. The Academic Internship Programs Office is like a main hub for a lot of those internships, as well as UC San Diego students have access to a portal called Handshake. And on Handshake, you can look at different internship postings, both paid and volunteer internships. So hopefully that gives you a general scope of the opportunities out there for you and kind of fully answers your question there. But if you have additional questions, feel free to let us know. And it looks like Kristen added the AIP link in here. Thank you, Kristen. So that's the website that I was referring to with the Academic Internship Programs Office. Some of the links on that website may not be accessible to you since y'all aren't current UC San Diego students. However, there is a lot of great information there about the internship programs at UC San Diego and how you can get involved in those internships. Let's see, I think, yeah, so as I mentioned, I kept the slides pretty short because I wanted to make sure that I had enough time to answer the specific questions that y'all have. And I did notice that we have some additional people who entered the chat. So I want to make sure that y'all have an opportunity to ask any of those questions that you have. But I wanted to keep it kind of high level because y'all are still learning more about UC San Diego and more about the psychology department. So I don't want to bore you or go over detailed with a lot of the nitty gritty details. I want to focus on what y'all are interested and excited about. So we have an anonymous question says, do you personally think it is difficult to get into psychology? Great question. And it's kind of a two-pronged approach. So at UC San Diego for the admissions process, the admissions office for first-year students, the admissions office doesn't consider your major when it comes to reviewing applications. But when it comes to transfer students, that's where things change. So is it difficult to get into UC San Diego? We are a competitive institution, as Kristen, who currently works in admissions, I used to work in undergraduate admissions. She can definitely answer in the chat about statistics, or you can look that information up at the admissions website. So yeah, UC San Diego is a competitive institution, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. And as I was mentioning earlier with the majors, all of our majors, let me go back. All of our majors are uncapped. And what that means for you as a prospective student is as long as you're accepted to UC San Diego, you will be accepted into a psychology major. There's not an additional screening process for any of the psychology majors. So the main thing to focus on at this point of your career, or educational career at least, is if you're a first-year student, meaning a high school student, and you're planning to go directly to UC San Diego after high school, focus on making yourself a competitive, well-rounded applicant. Focus on getting involved in extracurricular activities, focus on improving your standardized test scores, focus on making sure that you're finishing your high school year strong, and just making yourself as competitive of an applicant to UC San Diego as possible. But also focus on the personal insight questions too, make sure that you're telling your story in the application. For any community college students or prospective transfer students, a lot of your review is going to be focused on your units and your GPAs, but you also have those PIQs too in your UC application. So just make sure that you're putting your best foot forward on the application and continue to ask as many questions as possible. We're here to answer those questions for you. So you want to make sure that you're answering those questions. Can you transfer into clinical psychology as a transfer student? Yes. So any of these majors are open to transfer students. For our transfer students, your best bet is to follow assist.org. Just because those are all the lower division courses that you will have to complete for your major. Those aren't courses that you have to complete prior to being admitted to UC San Diego. However, I do encourage our prospective psychology transfer students to finish as many of those courses as you find feasible at your community college or prior institution, just because any course that you don't finish for lower division, those are additional courses that you'll have to take when you start at UC San Diego. So it could potentially prolong your time to degree if you aren't already taking at least some of those lower division courses at community college. But since we're not a CAP major, there's not a minimum major prep that we're looking for. There's not a minimum major prep GPA that we're looking for. So you just want to make sure that you're competitive and admissible to UC San Diego as a whole. But to put yourself in the best position, I would take as many of those assist.org classes as possible. The next question, I didn't notice a specific path for psychology in the law. Would there be any way to pursue that path at UCSD? Great question. Depending on what you want to do with your law degree or what law looks like for you in the future, there are a number of ways that you can go about it. You can either do any of our psychology majors and then just make sure you're taking the appropriate coursework to go to law school and be pre-law. And that's where our career center is very helpful for our students, because they can connect you to other folks who were interested in law and also had psychology majors at UC San Diego. They can show you what law schools are looking for when they're looking at UC San Diego applicants. So there's a number of ways to go about it, but you are correct that we don't have a general psychology and the law. Excuse me. So the best major for someone interested in that would probably be either one of the general psychology majors. And I think there is a case for any of the other specializations too, like a social psychology or business psychology. It's just about how you're going to market yourself to those graduate programs and to those jobs that you're applying to. They're going to want to see how you're applying your major, not just what your major is called. So definitely want to spend some time doing some research on the schools that you're interested in to see if you have the proper prerequisites for the course, which is more important than just having like a specific psychology and law major. Next question, where do we find classes for the degrees, i.e. classes for the clinical psychology versus the BA? That's actually on our website. And before we conclude, I'll show you that on the website and I'll put a link in the chat. But I just want to make sure we get to these remaining questions before I go to the website. So hold off on that for just a second, but I will provide you with a link. Next question, in regards to the growing field for a physician assistant, do you have any information about the different career opportunities that a PA has in a clinical setting in the field of psychology? That's an excellent question. Unfortunately, it's a question that I'm not the most appropriate person to ask that. I think this is a question that would be more appropriate for our career center. So what I'll do is when we transition, and we can actually transition over to the website right now, we can look at like a couple of the career pages on our website, and we can, or at least I can put some of those in the chat so you can have that information. So let's see, what do we do here? So I'm gonna just pause the screen sharing really quickly just to be able to pull this. Major match quiz, majors. Perfect. So resume share. On our psychology website, and the link that I'm about to put in the chat as soon as Zoom lets me, this is where you'll find all of the major requirements for our psychology majors at UC San Diego. So that website has all 10 of our psychology majors. It has all of the major requirements, and it lists those requirements based off of the major areas. It also has the classes that you need to satisfy those requirements. So if you're looking at like transferring from a community college, you can look at our website in conjunction with assist.org to make sure that you're taking the appropriate courses to transfer to UC San Diego successfully. Oh yeah, and for the career opportunities that a PA has, if you were to follow that same link that I put in the chat, there is also a careers page under that undergraduate program section, or you can just tap the search icon in the upper right and type in careers, and it will take you to one of the pages of our website that talks about the different careers that are related to psychology and how you can accomplish those with the majors at UC San Diego. Next question, what graduate degree should I be pursuing if I want to be a therapist that works with child development and parenting? Excellent question. I think there isn't a like just singular answer to that question. I think that when it comes to looking at prospective graduate schools, the best resource for me, at least when I was looking for graduate schools, was to just start Googling different graduate programs out there just to see what's all out there. Because what you'll find as you're doing your research is that different programs are called different things at different graduate schools. So doing the research first will give you a scope of what types of programs are out there for you. And then from there, I think the most important thing is creating a list of your wish list for what you want out of your graduate school. Do you want to go to a graduate school in California? Do you want to go to a big graduate school, a small graduate school? How diverse are you hoping that your school is going to be? Those are the types of questions that will help you narrow down that list. But that's something that the Career Center would be able to talk to you more about at UC San Diego, or maybe at your community college, or if you're currently in high school, maybe one of your guidance counselors would be able to give you some direction. But that's definitely a question that you'll be able to answer a little bit more effectively and efficiently once you're currently at UC San Diego. Which is a long way to kind of half answer the question, half not answer the question. As advisors, we only work with the undergraduate side of things. So when it comes to counseling students on graduate programs, we usually defer to the Career Center, unless it's specifically about our graduate program, which is to give you A general idea is also a PhD in experimental psychology. There's also a joint doctoral program with San Diego State University within clinical psychology. So a couple of graduate programs associated with UC San Diego, but for those specific ones or looking to get an idea of which specific ones are out there, you'd want to talk to the Career Center or at least start doing some Google searches, in your spare time. Next question, are we able to talk to your Career Center before we transfer? Asking someone who's applying right now to UC San Diego. To my understanding, most of the Career Center services are limited, at least on the front end, to UC San Diego students. However, when you're applying to UC San Diego, you'll be getting a lot of information from Kristen in the admissions office about events that are going on, like fall showcase events, evenings with UC San Diego, Triton Day, which is a large admin student event. These are the types of events where all departments will be on campus, and if we are able to safely be on campus, we would be on campus. But nevertheless, we're all made available to talk to you all about your questions about making the right choice for UC San Diego. So to answer your question more directly, you can't necessarily access all of the Career Center stuff before transferring, but prior to committing to UC San Diego, you'll be able to talk to the Career Center. Next question, is it possible to work as an intern or shadow in person in a world without the pandemic, of course, where I can work with a licensed therapist during my undergraduate years? Great question. There's nothing that would be housed specifically through our office in terms of shadowing or interning with the licensed therapist. That's not a program that we specifically have, but that's not to say that that's not an internship that could come up through that AIP website or just through different researchers or therapists looking to work with our undergraduate students. This is another one of those instances where working with the Career Center could be very helpful, because perhaps there are some UC San Diego alumni who are doing work as licensed therapists that would be looking to have UC San Diego students intern or shadow for them. That's where the Career Center would come in to kind of help you find out what will be best for you in that sense. And then the last question for now, but we have plenty of time, so if you have additional questions, keep sending them in. Who should I talk to weigh/discuss social science and medicine versus psychology/clinical? I'm not fully sure I fully understand your question in terms of socioscience and medicine, but if you have like a specific major at UC San Diego that you're comparing to the clinical psychology major, my best advice would be to use that major link that I put in the chat. Look at the course options for the clinical psychology major and look at the courses that you're required to take to see if you're even interested in the coursework. That would give you an idea of whether or not you're interested in clinical psychology. And then for like a career or major in medicine or socioscience, that's where the Career Center would come in. Or if you find a specific major at UC San Diego that aligns with some of your interests, you might looking at one of their advisors to see if they have an advisor who can meet with you as a prospective student. You might also consider seeing if there's any Triton Talks or admissions events going on where someone along those lines or majors or career fields is doing a presentation similar to this one, so that you can find that information there. Next question. Which UCSD college would you recommend for a psychology BS major? Great question. The colleges at UC San Diego are actually not major specific. Your colleges are tied to your general education classes, and most times for first year students, you'll be living in your college if you choose to live on campus. So admissions, and Kristen will put the direct link because I don't remember the exact link off the top of my head, but there is a link on the admissions website that has some information about the colleges at UC San Diego. Each of them has their own general education classes, their own philosophies, their own themes. But it's really designed just to shrink the campus for you and to give you a bigger or a smaller community feel at such a large UC campus. So look on the admissions website to read more in depth about the colleges. And Kristen just put the colleges website in the chat. So that will give you an idea of each of the individual colleges. But if you remember anything from the presentation, please remember that the colleges are not tied to your major nor to your admission at UC San Diego. So regardless of how you rank the majors the colleges on your application, if you're admitted to UC San Diego and in the major of your choice, that won't have any bearing on your college. That's just like the general education classes. Next question, is a clinical psych degree both BA and BS or just BS? Great question. The only BA major we have is that general psychology BA major. All of our other majors are Bachelors of Science majors, which, just to reiterate, and let me go back to the slide for those of y'all who entered after we started, even though most of our majors are BSs, that's not to say that the BSs are inherently better than, or sorry, didn't mean to, that doesn't mean that the BSs are inherently better than the BA majors. It's just that being that UC San Diego is a research-based institution, most of our majors are going to be aligned with some type of research, which is where that BS component comes in. But the BA degree is good for anybody interested in any type of counseling or therapy, which we honestly find a lot of students constantly trying to choose between the psychology BA and clinical psychology BS, because they think that in order to be a successful therapist and go to a graduate program that they're really interested in, they need to have a BS because they think that that's inherently better than a BA. But I'm telling you as an undergraduate advisor that that is actually not the case for UC San Diego. The only difference between a psychology BA and a clinical psychology BS are 2 research courses. You have to take an additional science course as a BS, as well as an additional calculus course as a BS, but everything else with the major is the same. So all of your elective courses can still be related to clinical psychology as a BA major. You just won't have to have that research component. Do the BS degrees require physics or OChem? Great question. So for all of our psychology majors, no matter if it's a BA or a BS degree, you are required to take some number of natural science courses. For the BA, you're required to take 2. For the other majors, you are required to take 3 courses. You have the option of taking physics to satisfy the natural science section of your major, but it's not required. OChem is not required at all for any of our psychology majors. So on that major link on the website that I put in the chat, you can look through to see what options you have for satisfying the natural science, but it usually comes from biology, the biological sciences, chemistry, physics. There is a cognitive science class that counts for one of the the natural science courses. And I believe there's also a biological psychology class that counts for the natural sciences. So you have quite a bit of options to choose for your sciences for your major, but it's not absolutely required, which does bring up a good point for any of y'all who are interested in being pre-med. You will want to take OChem for being pre-med, and we do have specific pre-med advisors at UC San Diego who can help you figure out what being pre-med means for you, but it's not required to be pre-med, and it's not required to do OChem for any of our psychology majors. So it looks like we have like all the questions answered so far. Want to just give like a couple more minutes for any outstanding questions about anything that we covered, or maybe anything that we didn't cover. As I mentioned, I kept the slides relatively short, just to really focus on answering many of y'all's questions. So really all the slides just focus on major and research. A couple of highlights as I give time for last questions. One, we do have psychology student organizations in our department. So we do have Psych, which is an international psychology club, as well as a general psychology club. We also have a psychology honors program, which for your junior and senior year, you'll be doing an honors thesis and working directly with faculty members. So there's quite a few ways to get involved as a psychology major within our department. We just always encourage that our students seek out all of these wonderful opportunities and continue to ask questions, as many of y'all are doing. And as I say that, one more question in. Are there a lot of applicants to apply for psychology, and which psychology department is the least applied for? Great question. As I mentioned, I don't work currently in admissions. Kristen, if she has the answer, she can give that in the chat, but it changes so much year to year. And as I mentioned a little earlier, major isn't something that matters when it comes to applying to UC San Diego, at least for first year students. For transfer students and those coming from community college, your major does play a role in the application process. But for all the high schoolers in the chat, your major will not. Regardless, though, the least applied for psychology major is that sensation and perception major, which I mentioned we only have 5 students in that major currently. But the most important thing to know is that no matter if you choose sensation and perception or the psychology BS, that's not going to hinder or help your chances of being admitted, since we're not a capped major. The most important thing is just to focus on having a well-rounded application and focusing on your personal insight questions and just trusting that you're going to put your best foot forward on the application. And the admissions officers will, as they're reading your applications, will take all of that information into consideration as they're reviewing your application. But last couple years, UC San Diego has had a lot of applications overall, but unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to give the exact number of how many psychology students because I don't have that off the top of my head. How much time is spent reviewing one application? That's more of an admissions question. And as an advisor, I wouldn't be able to answer that. The psychology advisors aren't actually reviewing the applications. That's housed entirely through admissions. So if Kristen has an answer to that, who's our admissions rep who is joining us today, she can type an answer to that for you all. But that's not one I would be able to answer. And then as a transfer student, can we switch to a different psych major if admitted? Yes. Any student at UC San Diego can freely switch into our psychology major since they're not capped. So whether you come in as a BA, a BS, or come in as undeclared, biology, mathematics, you can freely switch into the psychology major regardless of if you're a first year or a transfer student. The main emphasis at UC San Diego is really time to degree. So although you can switch major at any time, we advise students not to continuously switch their major every single quarter or wait to the last quarter to switch to a completely different major pathway, because that's just going to continue to prolong your time to degree. And that's not something that your advisors want to see, because we want to make sure that you're maximizing all of your time at UC San Diego as a psychology major. And if you're constantly switching majors, then there's obviously something bigger that you might want to figure out with an advisor. So that's where just continuing to ask these questions is going to be super important. And I noticed that Kristen put in the chat the link for admissions questions. So any of those questions that are specific to the application process, you want to direct those questions to that link that Kristen shared. Thank you, Kristen. How many people in total are overall psych majors? Assuming that you mean like any psychology major, not necessarily just a specific BS, we have over 2,100 psychology majors at UC San Diego and 575 minors. If you wanted the specific BS number, I believe that the general BS has about, it's either I think it's a little under 400 students. I think it's somewhere around 390 students are in the BS, and around the second biggest major on here is business psychology, and I think that has just over 300 students. Great questions so far. We have a little bit more time for questions if there are any other questions out there that haven't been answered yet. But as Kristen mentioned, there are plenty of these Triton Talks out there, so I highly encourage you to review this recording, but also check out some of the other recordings. Admissions spend a lot of time putting these together to make sure you have all of these questions answered in a timely manner, but also to be checking your email for other events that might be going on, and continue to ask these questions. Although we do have limited time to answer questions through this webinar, we are available to continue to answer additional questions. I'm going to put our psychology email in the chat as soon as I can find the exact email, just so in case y'all have questions beyond today, you'll be able to easily ask that of us. So let me just copy and paste the email really quickly. But currently it doesn't look like there are any additional questions. So I'm gonna give it like 60 more seconds for additional questions to come through. But if there aren't additional questions out there, the email is in the chat. So if you do have specific questions as a prospective student, you can send those questions to us and we'll do our best to try to answer them as soon as possible. And I hope to hopefully be advising all of y'all, or most of y'all at least in the future, as psychology students at UC San Diego. Thank you all for taking the time this afternoon to hear what I have to say. Of course, in a remote environment, sometimes it's a little difficult. Talking to a bunch of students through Zoom can be kind of fun sometimes. And I enjoy doing this. So any questions that y'all have, that's what we're here for. But I just want to thank you for all your time and hope y'all have a good rest of your evening.